Pam Bondi sat forward, her tone sharp, her accusation clear. She smiled as if she had the room in her grip, delivering a carefully crafted barb meant to discredit. The air was thick with expectation until Jasmine Crockett leaned in. "Ma'am," Crockett said, her voice low, unwavering, "are you aware that the very evidence you're citing was retracted yesterday?" Silence. Bondi blinked. Her lips parted slightly, a flicker of confusion breaking through her polished veneer. She stammered, then froze. The panelists shifted in their seats. A cameraman gasped. Somewhere in the back, a pen dropped. For 3 seconds, it felt like the entire chamber was holding its breath. Then, flash, flash, flash. The media pounced. Screenshots, clips, headlines. Bondi caught off guard. Crockett's calm clapback. Twitter flooded with hashtags. Jasmine exposed. The lies. Pam Bondi collapse. Side-by-side memes popped up before Bondi even found her voice again. Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't flinch. She simply returned to her notes, letting the silence speak for itself. Dignity wrapped in steel. A woman who came prepared not just to show up, but to stand tall. Bondi fumbled, trying to spin. "That's not what I was told," she began, but the damage was done. Crockett had flipped the power dynamic in one sentence, and Bondi's carefully rehearsed persona had cracked under pressure. Outside, pundits were already reacting live. "Did that just happen?" "She walked into that." Crockett didn't raise her voice, she raised the standard. It wasn't just a rebuttal. It was a shift, a reckoning. A moment where millions watching saw a woman of color, calm and composed, challenge the narrative and win. But to understand how this showdown exploded on live TV, we have to rewind. To the lies Pam Bondi thought no one would question. This wasn't just a clash between two public figures. It was a collision between two versions of America, one rooted in lived experience and accountability, the other in polished spin and performative outrage. And the chamber where it happened wasn't just a room. It was a stage, watched live by a nation teetering between hope and exhaustion. The parliamentary hearing had been billed as routine oversight another day, another panel of experts giving testimony. But underneath that procedural surface, real stakes were boiling. Policy wasn't just being debated, identity was, and into that space walked Reppers Jasmine Crockett, a voice forged in grassroots justice, prepared to challenge the false narratives being paraded as fact. Pam Bondi, on the other hand, came in with a resume padded by media hits and partisan loyalty. She wasn't there to inform. She was there to perform, to deliver sound bites dressed as truth, confident that her credentials would shield her from scrutiny. But for millions watching, the lines were clear. This wasn't just about a disputed memo or contested claim. It was about how power disguises itself. It was about who gets to speak unchallenged and who is expected to stay quiet. And when Crockett called out the lie, live and without hesitation, it pierced something deeper than the moment. It was the sound of generations watching someone finally say, enough. Because how many times have we watched powerful figures lie with ease and walk away untouched? How many hearings have we watched where the expert is wrong, but their title grants them immunity? This time, someone pushed back. And it wasn't with shouting or scandal. It was with truth, the kind that slices quietly, but leaves no room for recovery. That's why this mattered. For the immigrant mother watching with her daughter, seeing someone who looked like them speak with power. For the teacher who's told to stick to the script while knowing the truth deserves more. For the student who's tired of being told their identity is a debate topic. This wasn't just about one lie. It was about every time someone in power underestimated who was sitting across from them. And when Bondi's face fell, when she reached for a defense that wasn't there, it triggered more than embarrassment. It triggered a reckoning because, What happened next didn't just shake Bondi, it shook the nation's trust in every televised expert. So who exactly is Pam Bondi, and how did she get here? Pam Bondi's career didn't start in scandal, but scandal never seemed far behind her rise. As Florida's Attorney General, she built a reputation for sharp suits, media polish, and press conferences that sounded tough but rarely delivered substance. She knew how to play the part: the reformer, the fighter, the protector of law and order. But behind the scenes, another story was taking shape. She declined to pursue major fraud investigations. She accepted campaign donations from controversial figures, including a now infamous $25,000 check from Donald Trump's foundation, just days before her office quietly dropped a case against Trump University. When questioned, Bondi brushed it off as coincidence. But for watchdogs and ethics experts, it was déjà vu, another official playing the game, shielding power from consequences. When Trump rose to the national stage, Bondi didn't hesitate. She became one of his most visible defenders, not just legally but theatrically. On the Republican National Convention stage, she launched fiery attacks against political opponents. Her speeches were less about facts and more about fealty, red meat for the base, wrapped in courtroom bravado, commentators noticed. "She doesn't just toe the line, she sells it," one journalist remarked. Another tweeted during her RNC appearance, "Pam Bondi is what happens when ambition outruns ethics." In legal circles, whispers turned into open skepticism. Bondi seemed less interested in truth and more invested in narrative control. She knew the power of a good headline, a camera-ready moment, a talking point that could survive a news cycle, even if it couldn't survive cross-examination. That's what made her appearance at the hearing so strategic and so predictable. She wasn't there because of expertise. She was there because she fit the role. A former attorney general, a loyal Trump ally, someone who could lend institutional weight to a partisan message. And the message was clear: cast doubt, shift blame, distract. She spoke in absolutes, cited figures without sources, and weaponized her tone to imply authority. It was classic Bondi, confidently wrong, but with just enough poise to make it seem plausible to the untrained ear. But this time, the audience was listening differently. Social media wasn't buying it. "Why is Pam Bondi acting like we don't have Google?" one user posted during the hearing. Another tweeted a side-by-side of Bondi's claims with actual documentation, captioned, "Lie louder, Pam, we still have ears." Clips circulated. Her posture, her dodges, her deflections. The moment she repeated a claim that had already been publicly debunked, and did it with a smile. Commentators on both sides began asking, was this testimony or theater? But the most telling thing wasn't what she said. It was how certain she was that no one would challenge her. How rehearsed she sounded, how unshakable her confidence, until it wasn't. Pam Bondi had walked into that room expecting control, expecting the usual nods, the respectful silence that often greets powerful women with establishment credentials. What she didn't count on was Jasmine Crockett. And what Pam Bondi didn't expect was Jasmine Crockett. Before the cameras, before the congressional spotlight, before the viral takedowns and trending hashtags, Jasmine Crockett was just a daughter of Dallas with a law degree and a conviction that justice shouldn't depend on your zip code. She didn't chase power, she chased fairness. As a public defender, Crockett was the person standing beside those the system routinely ignored, the accused without resources, the voiceless facing impossible odds. She didn't do it for headlines. She did it because someone had to. Because the courtroom should never feel like a trap, and the law should never speak in code that only privilege can understand. Her colleagues described her as relentless, not just in her arguments, but in her preparation. Where others skimmed, she studied. Where others avoided tough cases, she volunteered. "You can't fight what you don't understand," she once said. "So I make it my job to understand everything." It was that grit that carried her from defender to reformer. When the Texas legislature felt unreachable, she ran. And won. Not with a war chest of corporate donors, but with a groundswell of support from working people who recognized her not just as a politician, but as one of them. In the Texas House, she became a lightning rod in the best way. Unapologetically black, unapologetically bold, and deeply strategic. She didn't grandstand for clout. She fought for clarity. She called out racism when it wore a suit. She called out hypocrisy when it hid behind procedure. And when asked why she wouldn't back down, she smiled and said, "Because I've never seen power give anything away for free." National media took notice, not just because she was sharp, but because she made truth sound like power and made power answer for its distortions. Her interviews weren't performances, they were masterclasses. Her hearings weren't polite exchanges. They were pressure tests for whoever dared bend facts in her presence. Still, Crockett never traded fire for fire. She understood rage, but she wielded it with precision, not performance. Even her critics admitted it. She was measured, methodical, devastating in cross-examination, but never cruel. She didn't aim to humiliate, she aimed to unmask, and she never forgot why she was there. "I walk into every room thinking about the people who can't," she once told a classroom of college students. "If my presence doesn't change the temperature, I don't deserve the seat." So when Parliament extended the invitation, she didn't hesitate. She knew the hearing wouldn't be neutral ground. She knew the lineup of so-called experts was skewed, and that the stage had been prepped for narrative, not nuance. But Crockett came anyway, because when power speaks without truth, it isn't just dangerous, it's contagious. And Crockett had made a career out of inoculating the public with facts. She didn't rehearse for TV moments. She researched for impact. She didn't come for sound bites. She came for substance. As the hearing approached, allies texted her warnings. "They're going to come at you. Watch out for traps. Bondi's going to try to twist your words." Crockett's reply was short. Let her try. She showed up with a binder, a calm gaze, and a voice that didn't rise unless it had to. No entourage, no theatrics. Just the quiet confidence of someone who had never depended on approval, only on the truth. In her opening remarks, she didn't posture. She told a story about policy, about consequences, about how real people live under the weight of political theater. She didn't call out names. She called out patterns, but it was when Pam Bondi tried to discredit her with a fabricated claim that the transformation happened. That's when Crockett leaned forward. That's when the calm turned into confrontation. That's when the courtroom became history. Because Jasmine Crockett doesn't just dismantle lies. She erases the room they used to live in, so when these two women clashed, it was never going to be civil. It was going to be legendary. It began the way so many of these exchanges do, with a smirk. Pam Bondi adjusted her mic, cleared her throat, and launched into a monologue wrapped in certainty. "What we're seeing here," she said, "is a pattern of misrepresentation. And frankly, Representative Crockett has repeatedly pushed narratives that don't match the facts." The sentence hung in the air like smoke. Crockett didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned in just slightly, her eyes locked on Bondi, flipping calmly through her notes. "Which narrative are you referring to, Ms. Bondi?" Bondi hesitated for a split second. "The statements you made about the legislative budget breakdown." Crockett raised her hand gently. "Are you referring to the allocation data from last quarter?" Bondi blinked. "Yes," Crockett nodded. "Then I'd like to submit for the record the official budget summary issued 3 days ago by the Oversight Committee." She slid a document across the desk. Bondi didn't touch it. "Because what that summary shows," Crockett continued, her voice low and even, "is that the numbers you just cited were revised and corrected. By your own office." A murmur moved through the room. Bondi smiled tightly, trying to regroup. Well, those numbers weren't available when I made my statement. They were time-stamped the morning before your press release, Crockett said, and included in the materials you received ahead of this hearing. It was the kind of precision that didn't shout, it stunned. Bondi's tone shifted. She moved from confident to defensive in under a minute, reaching for phrases like, "based on my understanding," and "from what I recall." But the armor was cracking. Her cadence grew uneven. Her posture tightened. The assuredness that had carried her through cable news hits and campaign rallies was disintegrating under the weight of facts she couldn't refute. Meanwhile, Crockett didn't raise her voice once. She let the documents speak. She asked short, surgical questions that left no room for evasion. And she listened not to respond, but to expose. Her silence between Bondi's flailing answers was louder than any rebuttal. The audience felt it. You could see it on the faces of committee members, staffers, even reporters in the back row. The tide had turned. Crockett wasn't playing defense. She was leading the entire room through a reality check in real time. Bondi tried to pivot. "This isn't about technicalities," she said. "This is about intent." Crockett cut in gently. "No, Ms. Bondi, it's about integrity." There it was. A moment that landed like a gavel, even before anyone said a word. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was electric, because the audience wasn't just hearing a debate. They were witnessing a reckoning, one where truth wasn't just spoken, it was demonstrated. Slowly, relentlessly, with the kind of clarity that couldn't be spun. Bondi shifted in her seat again. She started to speak, stopped, looked to the chair for rescue. None came, and across from her, Jasmine Crockett waited. Calm, steady, ready. But Jasmine wasn't finished, and her next line would obliterate Bondi's entire story. Crockett turned the page in her binder like she was flipping a switch. The calm didn't break it, deepened. She looked at Bondi the way only someone with nothing to prove and everything prepared could look, with patient disbelief. "Let's walk through this, since clarity seems to be in short supply," she said. Bondi bristled. "First, your claim about the budget. You cited $7.4 million allocated to community oversight programs. That figure was revised to $12.8 million after internal audits exposed a reporting error 2 weeks ago." Crockett slid another page forward, highlighting the section with a pen. "Second, your statement about youth incarceration rates being at an all-time low under your policies is demonstrably false. According to Department of Justice data, juvenile detention numbers in Florida increased by 9% during your final term." Bondi opened her mouth to object, but Crockett held up a finger. "I'm not finished." The room stilled. Even the camera operators slowed their movements. "Third, you insisted earlier that you had no prior knowledge of the retracted memo you referenced today. Yet, we now have email logs marked Exhibit C that show your chief counsel received and opened that very memo's retraction 3 days ago, time-stamped and verified." Crockett looked up. "So either you weren't briefed, which raises questions about your competence, or you were, and you chose to pretend otherwise." A low whistle emerged from somewhere in the gallery. It was involuntary, human, stunned. Bondi looked down at her notes, flipping through pages as if the answers might be hiding in the margins. They weren't. Crockett waited just long enough for the silence to become unbearable, then leaned in just slightly. "Ms. Bondi," she said, "you came here to lie for clicks, but this room still respects the truth." The words landed with surgical precision. Not shouted, not embellished, just spoken like fact because they were. For a beat, the room was frozen in place. Bondi didn't respond. She couldn't. Her hands tightened around her pen. Her mouth opened slightly, then shut. Again, her eyes darted toward the chair, toward the papers, toward anything but Jasmine Crockett. On the committee dais, one member visibly recoiled. Another pressed their lips together, suppressing a smirk. The chair looked down, shuffling papers, clearly, wishing the floor could open and swallow the tension. And outside that chamber, the internet exploded. "Jasmine cooked her alive," read the first viral tweet, paired with a 19-second clip of Crockett's final line. Within minutes, it had 100,000 likes. Within an hour, it was trending globally. Truth over Bondi. Crockett clapped back. Receipt season TikToks appeared before the hearing ended, lip-syncing Crockett's takedown, adding dramatic music, stitching it with videos of people gasping, screaming, cheering. YouTubers posted reaction breakdowns in real time. Cable news interrupted regular programming to replay the clip again and again, and the memes. Oh, the memes. Pam Bondi's confused expression captioned with, "When the receipts are real." Crockett's binder edited to glow like the Ark of the Covenant, Bondi whispering, "Is this recorded?" while Crockett stares like a professor grading a failed paper. But the moment wasn't just internet fodder. It struck something deeper. Because everyone watching had seen that dynamic before. The polished spin artist, confident in her privilege, expecting deference. And the black woman across from her, calm, prepared, doubted, and disrespected, who finally had the floor and didn't waste a syllable. Bondi didn't recover. Her responses grew vague, circular. She began qualifying her statements with, "perhaps, to the best of my understanding, and based on initial reports." Crockett? She didn't gloat. She didn't raise an eyebrow. She simply sat back, let the echo of truth fill the room, and waited for the next question. But the hearing never quite returned to normal. Even the subsequent witnesses adjusted their tone, sensing the shift. It wasn't just the facts that changed the room. It was the audacity of someone daring to speak them, unflinching, when it mattered most. Crockett didn't win with theatrics. She won with documentation, with timing, with restraint, with courage, wrapped in professionalism, the kind too often demanded without ever being rewarded. And it wasn't just a moment for her. It was a moment for everyone who had ever been told to be quiet while power lied through a smile. The mic drop didn't need music. It didn't need a raised voice. It didn't need a chair slam or a walk-off. It needed only the truth. The fallout was instant, and unlike anything Parliament had seen in years. By the time the hearing ended, Jasmine Crockett wasn't just trending. She was a movement. Crockett clapback soared to the top of X within minutes, followed by Truth over Bondi, Receipt Queen, and, simply, Jasmine. The clip of her dismantling Bondi's claims, calm, exact, devastating, was posted by journalists, activists, comedians, students, and celebrities, all adding the same caption. "This is how it's done." The video crossed 1 million views before the clock struck midnight. People didn't just react, they celebrated. They identified. They felt seen. One user wrote, "As a black woman in corporate America, that moment healed something in me." Another posted, "She didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar." A viral thread called it the single greatest live rebuttal since Katie Porter's whiteboard era, but sharper, smarter, and with more receipts. Then came the memes. Crockett's binder became a symbol stylized in fan art as a glowing object, wielded like a sword of justice. Her expression, calm and unimpressed, became reaction gifs for when someone tries it, but you came with facts. One meme read, "Pam brought vibes, Jasmine brought the footnotes." And while Bondi's silence echoed in the hearing room, her face spoke volumes online. Edits of her frozen expression, spliced with clips of crumbling buildings or Windows crash. Sounds went viral with captions like, "When you realize you're on the wrong side of the receipts." Others were more pointed. "She was ready for the cameras. Jasmine was ready for the questions." Celebrities chimed in too. Ava DuVernay reposted the clip with the caption, Prepared, poised, powerful. Thank you, Jasmine Crockett. Kerry Washington tweeted, "That's how you command a room." Even Cardi B shared the moment with an "oh, she ate that up." But it wasn't just famous names amplifying the moment, it was everyday people. Nurses, teachers, law students, parents watching with their kids. Tweets flooded the platform. "She spoke for me. This is what truth and power looks like. I'm showing this to my daughter tonight." On YouTube, reaction videos stacked up by the hour. Body language experts dissected the shift in Bondi's posture. Debate coaches used Crockett's performance as a masterclass. Commentary channels declared the takedown the closest thing to a political knockout in recent memory. News anchors broke protocol and dropped the usual both sides tone. "This wasn't a disagreement," one host said. "This was exposure." And in more measured circles, the language was just as damning. A senior political analyst called it a career-defining moment for both women in opposite directions. Another labeled it the most effective public accountability moment in Parliament since the Benghazi hearings. Bondi's team remained quiet. No clarifying statement. No follow-up interview. No spin. It was as if they knew there was no saving this one, because Crockett hadn't just dismantled a claim. She had peeled back a pattern, one that audiences had grown tired of: the confident lie, delivered with authority, rarely challenged in real time. This time, the truth got there faster, and it landed harder. In communities across the country, watch, parties turned into celebrations. Group chats lit up. DMs were flooded with links and fire emojis. One video showed a classroom of political science students erupting in applause during Crockett's final line. Another showed a barbershop replaying the clip on loop, patrons shouting, "Run that back!" It wasn't just support. It was collective validation. Crockett had done what millions had dreamed of doing, calmly confronting power with facts, stripping away the polish, and standing tall while the room caught up to the truth. And maybe that's why the moment stuck. Because it wasn't manufactured. It wasn't planned for virality. It was a woman doing what she had always done, coming prepared, staying grounded, and never blinking when the lie got loud. Pam Bondi may have walked into that hearing expecting to control the narrative. Instead, she became the footnote. But beyond the headlines, something deeper was happening. A moral realignment. This wasn't just a debate. It was a mirror held up to the nation. In Jasmine Crockett, people saw more than a lawmaker. They saw a reminder that dignity doesn't whisper, and truth doesn't flinch. That composure under pressure isn't weakness, it's power in its purest form. And that no matter how rehearsed a lie may sound, it will always collapse in the presence of someone who came armed with facts and fearless purpose. This moment shattered more than just Bondi's credibility. It shattered the illusion that credentials equal character, that media polish equals preparation, that confidence is a substitute for accountability. It forced people to confront the systems that elevate image over impact, and the women who've had to navigate those spaces with double the scrutiny and none of the shortcuts. Because the hearing room wasn't built for people like Jasmine Crockett. It was built to intimidate, to insulate, to maintain the performance of power. And yet there she was, unshaken, unafraid, and undeniably in control. She didn't demand the room's respect. She earned it. Sentence by sentence. Source by source. Truth by truth. And in doing so, she redefined what political courage looks like. It's not shouting the loudest. It's standing still while the storm rages around you. It's refusing to stoop to performance when you have the receipts. It's speaking softly when the lie dares you to shout, and letting the silence carry the truth home. What Crockett did was bigger than rebutting Bondi. It was bigger than one hearing or one headline. It was a generational shift. A declaration that the rules have changed. That the people watching, the ones who were told they were too loud, too bold, too black, too immigrant, too much are done shrinking to make others comfortable. Because what Jasmine Crockett proved in that room and on that day is that power no longer belongs to the loudest voice. It belongs to the clearest truth. And when that truth is spoken by someone who was never supposed to have a seat at the table, it echoes, it ripples, it realigns everything. This wasn't just Jasmine versus Pam. It was integrity versus illusion, preparation versus privilege, purpose versus performance. And in the end, it wasn't a collapse, it was a reckoning. As Jasmine once said, when asked how she stays calm under fire, "They expect us to shrink. We speak louder." In a world of spin, she gave us substance. In a room of power, she spoke truth to it. What we witnessed wasn't just a takedown, it was a turning point. A moment where the script flipped, and the person expected to sit quietly rewrote the narrative instead. From the first calm correction to the final devastating truth bomb, Jasmine Crockett didn't just expose a lie, she modeled what it means to lead with integrity. She didn't yell, she didn't flail, she didn't play to the cameras. She showed up prepared, and because of that, everything shifted. Pam Bondi walked into that hearing expecting applause. What she got was a mirror. And in that mirror, the entire country saw the cost of performative power and the unstoppable force of a woman who refuses to let truth be distorted on her watch. So if you felt that moment, the shift in the air, the vindication, the pride you're not alone, subscribe for more truth over noise breakdowns. Share this video if you believe dignity beats deception every time. And drop a comment below. What did this moment mean to you? Because if you felt that moment, you are the moment.